Hold on, wait a minute. Don't scroll any further. If you want to understand the Bible, you have to get this foundational knowledge. Genesis chapter 10 exposed the truth about your bloodline. Unlock the secrets of your ancient bloodline and discover how it influences your life today. Explore the mysteries of your ancient ancestral heritage and learn how your genetic lineage can reveal hidden strengths, weaknesses, and potential. Dive into the world of genealogy and spirituality to understand the connection between your past and present. Find out what your ancient bloodline reveals about your personality, abilities, and destiny. Get ready to uncover the surprising truths about your family history and how it shapes your identity and future. Discover the power of your ancestral roots and how they can guide you towards more fulfilling life. Learn how to tap into the wisdom of your ancestors and unlock your full potential. What does your ancient bloodline reveal about you now? Watch and find out.
I've spent years exploring scientific mysteries, but what if I told you that one of humanity's oldest texts contains a genealogical code that connects you to ancient nations? Genesis 10, the Table of Nations, isn't just a list of names. It's a blueprint. 70 families that became every nation on earth. Your surname, your traditions, even your physical traits might trace back to one of these original bloodlines. So the question is, which one are you? Genesis 10 divides humanity into 3 branches, the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, this isn't mythology. Historians and archaeologists have traced these lineages to actual population groups. Shem's line produced the Semitic peoples, Hebrews, Arabs, Assyrians. Ham's descendants spread across Africa and parts of the ancient Near East, Egyptians, Cushites, Canaanites. Japheth's children migrated north and west, becoming the Indo-European peoples, Greeks, Romans, and eventually most of Europe and Asia. But here's what's remarkable. Your cultural practices aren't random. That emphasis on hospitality could be Semitic influence, a warrior tradition in your family history, possibly Japhetic roots. The foods you eat, the way you structure family, these are echoes. So when you look at your own heritage, you're not just seeing recent history, you're seeing thousands of years of migration, adaptation, and survival encoded in your DNA and customs. What's even more intriguing is how genetics confirms these ancient patterns. Population genetics shows distinct clusters that align surprisingly well with these biblical divisions. Your genetic lineage carries markers, haplogroups, that trace migration routes spanning millennia. But genetics only tells part of the story. Those genes influence tendencies, yes, but they don't write your future. You inherit potential, not destiny. So what does your bloodline actually reveal about you? Think about the strengths passed down, resilience, creativity, leadership, but also the weaknesses, pride, tribalism, old conflicts. Genesis 10 shows us that every nation has a role, a character. The Phoenicians were traders and innovators. The Egyptians were builders and organizers. The Greeks were philosophers. Your ancestral line likely specialized in something, and traces of that specialization might still run through you. The question is, are you cultivating those strengths or repeating those mistakes? Now here's where it gets prophetic. Biblical texts suggest that in the last days, these ancient bloodlines will play specific roles. Nations will gather, old conflicts will resurface, and humanity will face a moment of reckoning. Whether you take that literally or metaphorically, the principle holds: your heritage matters, but your choices matter more. You're not bound by your bloodline, you're informed by it. So use that knowledge. Understand where you come from, honor what's worth keeping, and have the courage to break what needs breaking. Genesis 10 gives us the map, but you write the destination. Your bloodline reveals tendencies, history, and potential, but you decide what to do with that inheritance. So dig into your family story, ask the questions, trace the migrations, and then make the conscious choice about which traditions to carry forward and which to leave behind. Because in the end, your legacy isn't just what you inherit, it's what you choose to pass on.
Welcome, family, to the Yeshayahu channel. This is Yeshayahu, where we bring you the gospel of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, to address the problems of a modern world. Genesis chapter 10 exposed. Welcome to our channel. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and enjoy the show. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Wait a minute. Don't scroll any further. This is extremely important. If you want to understand the scriptures, then you need to pay attention to this video. If you don't pay attention to any other video, this is the one to pay attention to. Because from these genealogies spring all mankind, and you might want to know where you fall into. So we're going to look at the descendants of Noah. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. And the sons of Japheth: Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Yavin, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tiras. Now, these are ancient names, and in some scriptures, the translations, they tend to keep these names, whereas in most, they tend to give you the more modern name. But in those translations, you lose sight of who was who, right? So you got Japheth, right? And Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javin, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tiras. Well, let's start with Magog. That was a land just north of Israel, and there's a lot of prophecies concerning Magog, right? It's called a nation, which it is, but there's also a spiritual entity called Gog of Magog, and that's something a little different. However, it apparently is a very powerful spiritual entity that rules over the European nations. And then when you get to Madai, well, that's the Medes and the Persians. Madai is Medes. We call them the Medes. Ironically, that's the land of Iran today, right? And what's going on in the news? You know, the Iran war with the United States and Israel. So that would be Madai, right? But then you have Javan, and Javan is very important because from him descends. It's very European. So the Greeks are called the Javanese, right? And Tubal, many people think that refers to Tobolsk, the city in Russia, right? Meshach, many people believe, is the initial rendering of the city of Moscow. So what I'm saying is, in the translations today, you might be given more modern terminology, but then you start losing sight of the original people that inhabited these places. And the sons of Gomer: Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. Well, let's focus on this one because uh, we've heard this one and we hear it fairly regularly. You have a group of people called the Ashkenazi Jews. So that's problematic. And I've heard, you know, um, people go back and forth on it, debates and whatnot, because Ashkenaz is of the line of Japheth. Well, the Jews don't come out of the line of Japheth, so what the heck's going on here? Well, Ashkenaz is generally associated with the Germanic peoples, the Germanic tribes. So I believe what the Ashkenazi are saying is that they just took on that name more as a locale. They were amongst the Ashkenaz, the Germanic tribe. But a lot of people have a lot of heartburn with this term because if they're saying they're descended from Ashkenaz, well, what they're saying is they are not Jews. They might be Jews in religion, but not in lineage. So that's a big one. That's a big sticking point. So just bear that in mind. I don't know the answer to that either way, but that is problematic. So let's go down here. And the sons of Javan, Elisha and Tarshish and Kittim and Dodanim. And that's very important. Remember that we're talking about the European nations now, right? So remember I said the Greeks were called the Javanese or the Javanites, if you will. Well, they've also been called the Kittimites, right? Kittimites. So that's also an ancient name for the Greeks and the Macedonians, right? Also the Romans. The Romans are also, so the Greeks and the Romans, the original inhabitants were related. Tarshish. Now that's interesting because Tarshish, the scriptures prophecies about the ships of Tarshish and that the children of Israel will be brought back on the ships of Tarshish. Many people believe that's basically the modern day Iberian Peninsula, which would be Spain and Portugal. And ironically, of course, they were like the first maritime or big time European maritime nation. By these were the isles of the, I think this is the first time we see this word. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue and after their families in their nations. So the only people called in the table of nations who are called Gentiles are the descendants of Japheth, the son of Noah. Nowhere else is anyone referred to as a Gentile. Now we're going to see later on that kind of changes a little bit. It starts to refer to, at one point, it's anybody who is not a Jew, or it also refers to Israel when it becomes completely apostate and separates itself from its heritage, its inheritance. And of course, they go into captivity into Assyria. And the capital city of Assyria was called Nineveh. And today, remember, now there are modern names for these cities. Today it's called Mosul. I believe that's in Iraq now, right? But it was called Nineveh, and it was one of the greatest cities on earth at a certain point. And we kind of can track the captive Israelites as they were taken to Nineveh because of the book of Tobit. And of course, Tobit is part of the apocryphal writings. And it's an interesting read if you never read it, So, and I believe, I think Tobit was of the tribe of Naphtali. But it tells you that the children of Israel were in Nineveh after they were taken captive. And now we're going to go to Ham. And if memory serves, Ham means hot. right? So hot, which, because when they divided up, the three brothers got together, and this is not in the 66 books of the Bible. You have to go to the apocryphal writings. You have to read like Jubilees and the book of Jasher, and they'll give you some more. I call it the director's cut. You'll learn a little more, right? But Ham begot Cush, Mitzrayim, and Put, and Canaan. Now, we know Cush, and the interesting part about Cush, I think it means sun blackened or sunburnt. And later on, Cush, the modern term for Cush, became Ethiopia. But today, when we think of Ethiopia, what do we think? We think of that smallish country on the east coast of Africa. And we kind of say, look at the boundaries and say that was the extent of it. No. As far as the Greeks were concerned, the Europeans were concerned, Cush was basically all of sub-Saharan Africa, right? And then in northern Africa, you had Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim is interesting because the Greek term for Mitzrayim is Egypt. But you lose the definition by using these modern terms. So Mitzrayim actually means on something on the order of besieged, captive, between a rock and a hard place. So when in the Hebrew translation of their own scriptures, remember these are Hebrew scriptures, not Roman Catholic scriptures or something like that. When they said you were going back into, today's modern translation, you're going back into Egypt. Well, you're going back into Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim literally means captivity. So the very name is telling you where they're going, And then you have Put, and Put is, I believe, the Libyans. And of course, the borders weren't the same back then as they are today. So for the most part, you have Egypt and Put, which would be probably the remainder of northern Africa, or upper, above the Sahara Desert Africa, if you will. And Canaan. Right? So Canaan, we know about him because he's kind of the problem child here. And I think in the last video I talked about people claim that Ham was cursed. Well, Ham wasn't cursed. His son Canaan was cursed. It was almost a prophetic cursing because it was like Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth, knew what Canaan was going to do. So when the three brothers got together, and they had an agreement of how they were going to divide up the earth. And so Japheth would get the north parts. Shem would get the center parts. And Ham would get the southern part. And so they each individually divided up their parcels. And Canaan was supposed to get, I believe, a parcel towards the northwest coast of Africa. And he didn't like it. He liked what we call today the Levant. He liked Palestine, right? And he started moving in. And here's where the curses start. His brothers told him, that's not your land. That belongs to Shem. And he basically said, Shem could pound sand. I'm taking it. And his brothers said, look, dude, if you do this thing, you might get away with it now, but it's rightfully Shem's land, and he's going to come looking for it. At some point, he's going to be strong enough, get it, and the Most High is going to be with him, and he's going to take his land back. And if you just happen to be there, it's not going to be a good thing for you. Because, once you move an entire nation into a plot of land, it's not easy to move them all. So what choices will Shem have? Because it's his land. And there was an agreement. And they brought that agreement to Noah, and Noah blessed it. Everybody was in agreement. But Canaan, he went ahead and did what he did. So if you're wondering what curses? Well, he's cursed because of what he did. But Noah, in a vision, foresaw that great cursings were going to come upon Canaan. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan." And there you have it, right? And the sons of Cush, we'll go there, Sheba and Havilah and Sabta and Raama and Sabteka, and the sons of Raama, Sheba and Dedan. Now, if memory serves, this name Sheba is also a name in the line of Shem. So this is a specific Sheba, and then there's another Sheba. So anyway, and Cush begot Nimrod. And Nimrod, he began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before Yahweh. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahweh. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, and the land of Shinar. So that land of Shinar is important because that's where they started the first major cities, but not just major cities in terms of, let's say, ethnicity. This was the first city where all ethnicities were drawn to. And so it became known as Babel. And Babel means confusion. And a lot of people, and we're not going to go into detail on it, but Babel is the place where all nations were represented under one government. Well, there's a certain nation today that kind of fits that description. And, you know, I don't want anybody to get mad at me, so I'm not going to say, but yes, there's a certain nation, and it's fairly young, where they got together and said, we're going to recreate this thing. And, you know, it didn't go well the first time. We'll see what happens this time. So out of that land went forth Asher, and Asher is the progenitor of the Assyrians. And remember I said the capital of Assyria was Nineveh. And builded Nineveh and the city Rehoboth and Calah. Right? And reason between Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. Now we're going to go to the descendants of Mitzrayim, the Egyptian, the father of the Egyptians. Mitzrayim begot Ludim and Anamim and Lehabim and Naphtulim. Well, I'm having a problem with this, but you see it for yourself. And Pathrusim and Casluhim, out of whom came the Philistine, or the Philistine. That im, like the letter S in English, on the end of a word, it means plural, right? And the Caphtorim. And these names should look familiar. Pathros, right? Now, if you go to the book of Acts, and I'm not going to go all into it, but remember on the day of Pentecost, he actually gives a list of nations that the Jews came from. And they came to Jerusalem. It was like a annual pilgrimage. They came to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. And they were Jews from Pathros, right? So it turns out by that time, the Jews had a pretty thriving community amongst the Pathrusim. And they called it at that time Pathros, right? And of course, we saw Put, which is Libya. We remember Simon the Cyrene. Well, Cyrene is a city in Libya, or the land of Put. So the Jews were in a bunch of different nations in Africa, right? And people wonder why, we only know about, or a lot of people are under the impression that Christianity starts in Europe. Actually, it really started in Africa. Well, the Levant and into Africa, from Jerusalem into Africa. And then Paul took it into Europe. But one of the oldest Bibles, I think maybe the oldest Bible that contains the New Testament teachings of Christ would be the Ethiopian Bible, of which I have a copy, and I suggest everybody should get a copy because it has, unlike the 66 books of the Bible, I believe it has 88 books. So, it's something to think about. Why only 66 in the, I call it the European version, and 88 in the Ethiopian? You might want to compare notes. It might open up your mind to certain other things. And then we went through this, Mithraim, his children, and Pathros, and Kazluhim, out of who came the Philistines, and the Caphtor. And Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Now, this word is very interesting. The Sinite. And I keep saying I'm going to do a video on it. But this tribe here, you ever notice that by the time you get out to China and Japan, they're referred to as Sino, the Sino War, Yeah, Canaanite name. But we'll dig into that in another video. Just keep that in the back of your mind. And then, like I say, these ancient tribes, these ancient names have been replaced by modern names. And because they did that, you completely lose the plot. Keep that in the back of your mind. And the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite, and afterwards were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar unto Gaza. We've heard this name a whole lot lately. And thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah and Zeboim, even to Lasha. Now, I'm not inferring or insinuating that the people living in Gaza today are actually Canaanites, because, and this is the hardest thing for people to get. Just for instance, look at the English. Well, there are more English descendants in America than there are in England. And that's thousands of miles away. For the most part, I'm not saying everybody left, but for the most part, nobody's really where they were in the beginning. I mean, people, and then when they invented airplanes, forget it. People are scattered all over the world. It's not just, the people in Gaza they're Canaanites. Well, a lot of Israelites kind of hung around there too, right? A lot of Philistines hung around there. But most people left their original tribal lands, if you will, and have spread across the globe. So you don't know. I'm sure people argue because their argument will fit their narrative better, Like people think Magog, that's like Turkey, or because it's right above the Levant, right above Israel. So they must have been talking about that area. I guarantee Magog is nowhere near. I mean, the original inhabitants are nowhere near. Now, what I might give you is in the Old Testament, it talks about the spiritual entities that, and we're getting to that, the spiritual entities that rule over physical land territories. Like when I say Gog of Magog, that entity is mentioned in prophecy several times. And it's always from the north, coming from the north of Israel. And what people like to do is put it in a box and say, well, it could mean this. It's just that little area, just, a couple 100 miles north of Israel, whatever. And in their minds, no way it could be anything further north. Well, this is a spiritual entity. He's claiming territory. And that's a whole nother video, but you got to understand, they are territorial and we mimic them because this is Satan's world. Satan is the God of this world. And they have taught us from the time of the Watchers, they were teaching us how to organize. They were teaching us how to war. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully you know who the Watchers are. I'm not going to go all into that either. But remember, it was the Watchers who taught us astronomy, astrology, taught women makeup, how to entice men through painting of their lips and eyelids and all that stuff. And there was one. I tend not to want to mention their names because it's almost like you're invoking them if you mention their names. So go read the Book of Enoch and you'll learn their names. But there was one in particular that taught men the killing blows. It taught them war and the killing blows of death. And Yahweh had a serious bone to pick with that one. In fact, on Yom Kippur, if you don't know the story, on Yom Kippur, they take 2 goats. One goat they basically sacrifice in the temple, right at the temple site, and the other goat they leave alive, but they carry him outside the gates. Carry him outside the gates by the hand of a strong man till he can't find his way back, and then they let him go. Well, that's a metaphor or a type of, because they actually named the goat after that watcher, that fallen angel. So that goat has a name. They name it. And then they carry him outside of the gate into the wilderness so he can never find his way back. And they do that on Yom Kippur. And then you have to understand what Yom Kippur, what story is it telling? Each of the Moedim, meaning holy days, is telling a story. It's like a Broadway play is what it is. And they would reenact it every year so that they would never forget the plan of salvation. But guess what? They forgot the plan of salvation. So anyway, we'll continue on here. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. I'm going to stop here again. All these little details. You read one verse and it's got so much information in it. So Shem, one of his children's name is the father of all the children of Eber. Eber means Hebrew. Well, literally it means to cross over. But this is the term that begets the name Hebrew, Eber. And then what I like to tell people, I'm going to connect some dots here. Way down the road, that place called the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, which, by the way, had a heavy, I'll call it like this, a heavy Hebrew population. So the Romans, remember, Iberia would literally mean land of Eber or land of the Hebrews. Imagine that. So the Greeks called them the Iberians, and the Romans called them the Iberians or Hiperus. Think that through. They're calling the people in Spain and Portugal Hiperus. Doesn't that sound familiar? So I want you to understand, when they say, they say the Phoenicians were the first people to build settlements in what we call Iberia. Well, people hate to admit certain things. I said, what language do the Phoenicians speak? Well, they spoke Phoenician. Well, what is Phoenician? Well, it's Paleolithic Hebrew. So basically the Phoenicians were speaking Hebrew, and everybody in the Levant can understand each other. They might have accents further north and accents further south, but they can understand each other. They're speaking the same basic language, right? But the name of the land is Iberia, the land of the Hebrews. Imagine that, right? And so these terms are so important, but in a way, you have to ask yourself, why did they change the terms or the names? Was it because they just, time moved on and they forgot everything? Or were people trying to hide stuff? I mean, Iberia, that's pretty straightforward. They kept the name Eber in it, right? And the Jews, I'm not going to go. I have a video that goes all into the, the history of, after the Roman Empire broke up, 10 tribal nation states came out of it. I call it the 10 horns, right? Out of the beast. One of those horns was the Visigoths, who basically took control of Iberia and drove the Jews out. And here's another thing. Were they Jews? Well, I'll say it for now. They drove the Hebrews out. How about we put it that way? The term Jew became a widely used colloquialism. But when they got driven out to North Africa, basically, they made a comeback. They buddied up with the Black Moors. And everybody thinks the Moors are Arabs. No. Get that out of your head. Because when you read excerpts from books, you would see that the Visigoths were frightened of the Moors because of how they looked. Right? And, that's another video for another time. I think I have it in a couple of my videos. But understand this, the Moors were black people. I know everybody likes to think North Africa is really more part of Europe. No. Totally different genetics. In fact, the pharaohs of Egypt, their genetics mimic the people in what we call sub-Saharan Africa. There's a conspiracy to try to divide Africa into two parts. Well, no, there's the North Africa, which is really European. Because what it is, people want to claim Egypt. No. The pharaohs have the genetics of sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, they're competing. There are studies that say, no, they actually have European genetics. And then there's other studies. No, but they've even pulled their sacrilegious nature led them to dig up the graves, open up the tombs of the pyramid. It was sacrilegious. Who does that, right? And then when they measure the skulls, they got dosicola. I can't say these words. They have the skull of sub-Saharan Africans, right? Or a lot of the pharaohs, right? And then Herodotus, he says, they asked Herodotus, who was a well-known, esteemed Greek historian, they asked him about the Egyptians, and he said a lot of stuff. He said, oh, they're really dark, they got really thick lips, and really wide noses. I mean, come on. So everybody believes everything Herodotus says until he comes to that point. And then, he had a brain fart at that moment. He wasn't telling the truth there, but but it's political. There are people in North Africa who, Europeans want to claim North Africa as their own. No. In fact, if you're in the Torah, if you're in the Tanakh, Europe is hardly mentioned. Europe is not really mentioned until the New Testament. I mean, they make mention of it, but everybody Israel is dealing with is either African or what we call the Middle East. I call it Northeast Africa. And today people, because of the power of China and India, no, it's West Asia. Well, it's on a tectonic plate of Africa. Same flora and fauna as Africa, right? At least back then. Now, they've killed all that off, so you wouldn't know that maybe. But it's on the same tectonic plate. So anyway, I'm going to keep going here. Just remember that Eber name. That's where we get the word Hebrew from. The children of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. Now, Elam, I'm going off the top of my head. Some of this I just, I get, right? So Elam moved far into the east and is usually associated with the people we now call East India. Asher, again, you could say There's two Ashers mentioned. This could be the one that built Assyria. But I would think, maybe. I'd have to look back into that. If someone knows, just let me know. And the children of Aram, Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash, and Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And Joktan begat Almodad and Sheleph and Hazarmaveth and Jireh and Hadoram and Uzziel and Diklah and Obal and Abimael and Sheba. There's another, see, that's the other Sheba. And Ophir and Havilah and Jobab, and all these were the sons of Joktan. Now this term Ophir, I find it so interesting. Where did the Ophirians end up going? Remember, and this is the part people don't get, remember the children of Abraham were spreading. I mean, big time. So they're not in some little tiny land anymore. They're all over the place, but in bulk, they probably migrated eastward. And there are peoples in the east who actually claim to be descendants of Ophir. They always talk about the gold of Ophir. So wherever he settled, there was lots and lots of gold. So you got to think about it. Today, there's just certain points on the earth that have lots and lots of gold. And I'm keeping it to the old, what I call the old territories or old lands, like the continent of Africa, Asia, because at this point, I don't think anybody had migrated across the Atlantic Ocean. So there's things to remember. The Atlantic Ocean was called the Sea of Ethiopia, or they didn't say Ethiopia. They called it, what was the other term for Ethiopia? But basically, they named it after the Ethiopians or the Cushites, right? So keep that in mind. So they saw the Atlantic Ocean and this big body of water, and they said, yeah, we're not ready for that. And they call it the Sea of Ethiopia. And there's maps that show it that way. And their dwelling was Phoenicia as you go unto Sephar, a mount of the east. These are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nation. These are the families of the sons of Noah, after their generations in the nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So, a lot to think about there. But I think it's very important if you a lot of people, what they do is they run through Genesis. They're trying to read the Bible like a book. They just flying through it, not picking up the little subtle nuances. And you can't do that. There's too much upfront information that sets the stage for other things. And so they call this the Table of Nations. And I think it's 70 or 72. I can't remember. Generically, they say 70 nations. But there you have it. And this ties to other things. They mentioned Nimrod, right? Well, we're going to see later how this all comes together under Nimrod. And then the world order that Yahweh himself sets in motion after the destruction of the Tower of Babel. But we got time for that. Let's get through it. We're going to get to it. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? I knew that you would. So thanks a lot, everybody. We're going to cut it short here. And hopefully you learned something. This is good stuff. Shalom.
Can I uncover the secrets of my ancient bloodline and what it means for my future? Ancient bloodlines aren't just relics of the past, they're actually a key to understanding who we are today. By exploring these ancient connections, we can gain insights into our present selves and the world around us. It's fascinating to think that the paths our ancestors took, the struggles they faced, and the triumphs they achieved can still influence our lives in profound ways. Understanding how something as old as an ancient bloodline can still impact our lives today can be a challenge. Many of us might think that ancestry is just about dusty history books and old family trees. But the truth is, our ancestors' stories are etched into our DNA, influencing our traits, our talents, and even our destinies. It's easy to dismiss the idea that our ancient roots have any bearing on our modern lives, especially in today's fast-paced world. As we navigate the complexities of modern life, it's tempting to leave the past behind. But the reality is, our past is always a part of our present. The genetic markers that run through our veins, the cultural practices that have been passed down through generations, these are all threads that connect us to our ancient bloodlines. By acknowledging and exploring these connections, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Let's consider some examples. Certain genetic markers can predispose us to specific talents or aptitudes. For instance, some people may have a genetic inclination towards music or art. Similarly, ancestral migration patterns can influence our cultural practices and traditions. Think of the many families who still celebrate ancient holidays or follow traditional recipes that have been passed down through generations. Understanding our ancient bloodlines can also reveal surprising connections to our modern lives. For example, research has shown that many people today carry the genetic markers of ancient explorers or traders. This can manifest in a restless spirit, a love of adventure, or a talent for navigating complex systems. By recognizing these patterns, we can unlock a deeper sense of purpose and identity. The revelation that's both profound and empowering is that our ancient lineage is linked to our modern traits in ways we're only just beginning to understand. By exploring our ancestral journey, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. This journey of discovery can be a powerful catalyst for growth, healing, and transformation. In summary, ancient bloodlines offer a unique lens through which to understand ourselves and our place in the world. Our past is always a part of our present, and by exploring these ancient connections, we can gain insights into our modern lives. What do you know or suspect about your own ancient bloodlines? Share your stories and insights in the comments below. If you're curious about the hidden depths of human history and identity, be sure to subscribe for more videos that explore the mysteries of our past and their relevance to our present.
Book for Kids, Volume 2. Available August 15, 2025 on Amazon. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Children. Color 30 fun designs of inspirational verses and Christian artwork. A beautiful children's coloring book designed to fill your child's mind with the positive words of God's love. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Kids was designed to be a fun, yet effective way to help children calm their tension. Hand-lettered quotes and adorable hand-designed illustrations will inspire your child as they reflect on God's promises.